Hello everybody. I hope you guys are having a good week. I just want to thank you guys for the wonderful discussions in chapters 1, 2, and 3 of last week. So this week we're looking at chapter 4 and 5. So this video will be a mini topic on prenatal development. So we're going to look at the 3 stages of prenatal development. I feel like this is an important topic and I think you guys should focus on this. Some of your quizzes and tests will have this information on there. As I said, chapter 4 is pregnancy and prenatal development, and that'll be the focus for this short video. Okay, so first off, we gotta start off with, well, what is conception? So a lot of individuals believe that, life may begin, after birth or during the womb. So that has a lot of debate, as far as, controversial issues such as abortion. But we do have a gestational age that we consider an unborn child / baby. So this goes back to the first day that the mother had their menstrual cycle. Okay. And then conception is a part of that also, in which when the female becomes impregnated with the sperm. Okay. And when that egg actually fertilizes and implants within the woman, that's when we have the gestational age as well. Overall, prenatal development takes part in these 3 right here stages: germinal, embryonic stage, and fetal stage. Okay. Alright, so you're going to hear some fancy terms going throughout this mini topic. So we have, ovum, which basically just means the fertilized egg. And then we also have a zygote. Okay. And these are synonymous terms that are referred to as the growing organism. So at first we have a fertilized egg that continues to multiply over and over and over again and will eventually become an organism. Okay. And that's a zygote. So it kind of starts off first with the ovum and egg. Then that egg turns into a zygote that continues to multiply and gain growth. And then finally, when the zygote has a little bit more, how can I say it, has more living functions, so heart rate, breathing rate, digestive rate, we then have an embryo. Okay. And the embryo is an important stage. Going back to those 3 stages that we talked about up here, see there's a germinal, embryonic, and a fetal stage. So the embryonic stage has some important things that happen in that we'll talk about in the next few slides. Okay. We also have morphogens, and basically it's from molecules that are switched on after fertilization. So basically what that means is that there's going to be certain genes or certain processes that will be turned on in order for the organism to develop. Okay. I think in the first video that I sent you guys, we talked a little bit about organogenesis, and that's kind of a critical period when it comes to prenatal development. So it's the same thing with morphogens. There has to be certain things or processes that happen that are switched on after fertilization for a living organism to continue to develop. Okay, so organogenesis does not only refer to organs, but we also see that, the arms are sculpted, hands, fingers, vertebrae, ribs, brain, and other body parts as well. Okay, so before we get into the more specific stages of prenatal development, so the germinal, embryonic, and fetal stage, we also have to talk about growth patterns. So these 2 things right here are just different types of growth patterns, and we see them very much emphasized in prenatal development. But we also see this after prenatal development in infancy and early childhood as well. So cephalocadal principle, it's a very fancy word, but really it's very simple. Basically, it just means that growth patterns occur from the head downwards. Okay, so a good example of that is especially when you see a baby, maybe 3 months, 4 months old, you pretty much notice that their head's a little bit bigger than everything else, right? So basically what that is, kind of mirroring is the cephalocadal principle. Basically with this principle is that we see more growth in the head or in that top direction versus in the downward direction. And we do see that in infancy by the larger head. And that could also be implicated in how, infants, have trouble balancing their head, have trouble holding their own weight. And that's probably why we see infants don't really start to walk on their own or crawl on their own until a little bit later. Okay, infants typically around 12 to 18 months. That's when we start to see like they take their first steps. But in prenatal development, the cephalocaudal principle, we actually see that during the development within the womb. So basically, one of the first things to start to develop is the brain and spinal cord. So if you think about that, the brain is the topmost area of development, and it's the most essential function for everything that we do. So the brain pretty much controls our breathing, our heart rate, our sleeping function, our ability to think, our ability to talk. So the brain and spinal cord are very much following that cephalocaudal principle. So that's the first thing to develop in prenatal development, and then from there, then other things start to develop. Okay. The second growth pattern is the proximal distal principle. So this basically means development occurs from inwards to outwards. Okay. So typically you're always going to see cephalocaudal principle first in prenatal development because the brain and spinal cord are developing first. And then after, once those are developed, then you start to see the proximal distal principle or pattern. And once we have our brain and spinal cord developed, then we may start to see organogenesis during that embryonic period. So we'll see that our heart, so other organs such as our liver, digestive tract, pretty much any organ that you can think of. So inwards to outwards. So once the organs are actually developed through organogenesis, then the exterior is developed. So you start to see muscle tissue, bones, and then finally skin is one of the last things to develop when it comes to the proximal distal principle. Okay. Okay. So now we're going on in a little bit more descriptive detail on the actual prenatal development stages, which are 3 of them. So this is the first stage. This is the germinal stage. So in this stage, we basically have a conception occurring, okay? And basically, as I said before, once we have implantation of the sperm cell into the egg, then we'll have either attachment that may occur within the womb or expelling. Okay, so in the germinal stage, typically you're going to see a one-celled zygote. So that's the ovum that's fertilized and continues to multiply and multiply and multiply. And once it's at its last stages of multiplying, that's actually called a blastocyst. And it's a multicellular organism. Other words also multicellular egg, if you will. And basically, this blastocyst starts to burrow inside the uterine lining. So we also see that structures feed and protect this developing organism, and they start to begin to form. So some of those structures are the placenta, umbilical cord, amniotic sac, and those different types of structures. Okay. So overall, conception is going to be within a couple, maybe 24 hours. And then from conception, we have about 2 weeks after that. That's basically considered germinal stage. So from conception into about 2 weeks of this organism developing. So typically by the end of this stage, the blastocyst has been implanted into the uterine wall. And that's usually around day 6. And then once that happens, then we can move forward into the embryonic stage. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do that now. Okay, and this is just a quick little picture of what it looks like when we're talking about prenatal development. We obviously have to have, fertilization first. The ovum and egg have to meet, and the sperm has to fertilize the egg. And then we have continued cell division. And it keeps traveling throughout the fallopian tube, and then finally within the uterine wall, when it's a multicellular organism at its last couple of days, it's a blastocyst. Okay, and that blastocyst should, kind of implant itself between the 7 to 10 day period on average. Okay, so embryonic stage. So the embryonic stage is basically one of the most important parts of prenatal development because a lot of important things happen. So as I said in one of the earlier videos, there's a sensitive and critical period when it comes to child development. And one of the things that I talked about was organogenesis and prenatal development is actually a critical period. And if you guys remember, a critical period is something that has to happen in a specific time frame in order for development to occur. So organogenesis has to happen in this embryonic stage. If we don't see this happen in this stage, then we can't have a developing organism or an organism that can sustain itself. Because organogenesis basically provides all bodily functions, all body systems to work productively. So through that, we have the respiratory, digestive, and also the nervous system that's developed as a result of organogenesis. Okay. The embryonic stage will last about 2 to 8 weeks. And as I said, this is an important part of development because a lot of people, always say, well, what's the most, important part, or when is the stage that's most sensitive in prenatal development to like drugs, harmful substances, environmental hazards and stuff like that. And of course, obviously, all periods of prenatal development are very sensitive to that. And, mothers shouldn't, do drugs or be exposed to any harmful chemicals while they're pregnant. But we do see that the most impactful stage is the embryonic stage. The embryonic stage is most affected by any type of tetragen harmful substance because of what is occurring in that stage. So if you think about it this way, we have organogenesis happening in this stage. And let's say a mom is exposed to, a hazardous chemical. Maybe she's working, in a facility where she may be a janitor and she's working with very extreme hazardous cleaning materials, right? And could be that she's sensitive to that and inhales, that chemical, and that could cause some type of effects to that mother if that mother is sensitive to that. So it can maybe stop the process of organs developing or make the organs developed in a way that's maybe not as productive, or maybe they're also defective as well. So maybe not all the systems develop in that stage because of that harmful substance being exposed during this very important stage. Okay, so within that period, we have about, let's see, around the 3rd or 4th week, we have about 1/4 of an inch that this organism, how big that is. And then around 5 to 8 weeks, we have the organism being from 1 inch in length, and then also 1/2 ounce. So very small, but you start to kind of see the formation of a living organism. So you start to see kind of the head be a little bit more differentiated. You may also start to see the lower extremities start to be a little bit more differentiated. So this rapid size continues to increase in the embryonic stage. Okay, and also what's also very important during this stage is that because I'm saying that you can now start to see more defined characteristics of the organism, such as the head, the face, the arms, legs, and fingers, we also can make an assumption that if anything harmful comes to this, embryo during this stage, it can cause a significant impact. They may not develop all limbs, if a harmful substance is going to be influenced during this specific stage. Okay, and this is just a last little bullet point, but basically nature has its way of kind of doing its natural selection. So typically severely defective embryos usually don't survive the first trimester of pregnancy. So typically a woman will miscarry if there's a defective embryo. Okay. And that kind of goes into this next slide. So spontaneous abortion may occur as a result of natural selection, where nature understands that this particular organism may not be able to sustain itself because of maybe chromosomal differences, maybe not fully developed all extremities, or whatever it may be. Okay. As I said before, drugs of any kind could impact more spontaneous abortions or abnormal pregnancies. So maybe having more pain, extreme morning sickness, different effects such as those. Okay, so this is also really important. So we're starting to look at birth defects and when they occur. So this is just a very nice little diagram showing that, you know, there's a sensitive and critical period as to when something can be exposed to an embryo and have the most impact. So as I said, around 2 to 8 weeks, so right here, 2 to 8 weeks is the embryonic stage, right? So you can see in this stage, we have a lot of vital parts of ourselves that are being developed. So specifically the central nervous system, the heart, and the legs and arms have the most time within the embryonic stage where it's being developed. The central nervous system is very important because basically it controls our brain. Okay, it controls our brain, it controls our nerves as well. So the brain's spinal cord is the central nervous system. Okay, so the brain is the one that receives sensory information, and the spinal cord goes out to our lower extremities, and that's where we have a bunch of nerve fibers. So these nerve fibers, you know, send signals to other parts of the body. For example, let's say you've been cooking on a hot stove, and maybe you're not paying too much attention, and you accidentally burn your hand on the stove. Well, it's the central nervous system working. So when you touch your hand, that nerve ending in your hand is sending that pain signal all the way through your spinal cord up into your brain, and you perceive that as pain. So this is a very important system because without, you know, having an effective central nervous system, you know, we may not be able to function as properly, not able to think, to have a heart rate, breathing rate, whatever it may be.